Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bhan. The top stories that we're tracking for you this evening. The Sensex and the Nifty ended the highest closing level in 2025 so far. Mid-caps outperformed the blue chips. Bank stocks underperformed. Brent crude briefly drops below $60 a barrel. OPEC nations decide to increase output much higher than market estimates. Oil prices now near their 4-year lows.
Any trade deals calling this week?
It could very well be.
Can you tell us more about?
Nobody understands. We're negotiating with many countries. But at the end of this, I'll set my own deals.
President Trump hints that some trade agreements could be signed this week, but doesn't provide further details. Says his main priority with China is to secure a fair deal. President Trump orders a 100% tariff on foreign-made movies, saying Hollywood is dying a very fast death. The move is likely to impact Indian films that release in the U.S. Filmmaker Shekhar Kapoor says the new tariffs may encourage Hollywood to move outside the U.S. M&M beats estimates in Q4. Strong tractor sales drive growth with margins hitting multi-year highs. Revenues up 25% thanks to healthy volumes and a boost from realization. Private banks post robust deposit growth of nearly 6% in Q4, outpacing PSU banks. Private banks also report strong margin expansion, even as SBI's margins contract. Government sources say authorities have emptied the Baglihar Dam reservoir on the Chenab River and closed the gates, claim that water from the Chenab River will not flow into Pakistan's Punjab province via the dam until India refills the reservoir. Adds that similar steps may be taken on the Kishangang project on the Jhelum River. Israel's cabinet approved the plan to capture all of Gaza and remain there for an unspecified amount of time. The plan includes displacing thousands of Palestinians to southern Gaza. A 10-minute standing ovation for legendary investor Warren Buffett as he announces his retirement from Berkshire Hathaway at the age of 94. Longtime Berkshire executive Greg Abel will take the reins. Buffett promises he will not sell a single share in the company and will stay as chairman. Well, let's start with the market action for the day. No Monday blues on Dalal Street. The Sensex and the Nifty gaining in trade, ending at their highest level seen so far in 2025. Now, mid-caps did outperform, and the mid-cap index was up by almost 2%. Banks today in the red, closing about 200 points lower. The Sensex up by almost 300 points and 114 points, or 0.5% higher on the Nifty. In the money market, the rupee gained over 33 paise. It continues to strengthen against the dollar. The rupee has been gaining steadily over the last few weeks after President Trump's tariffs led to a weakening of the US dollar. The 10-year bond prices have gained in trade and yields softened. That's the money market snapshot for you. And in the commodity market, gold prices also continue to gain on the back of a weak dollar. Prices of 24-carat gold surging by 220 rupees from its previous close in today's trade. And price of spot gold in the international market up marginally to $3,257 an ounce. Meanwhile, crude prices have eased. This after OPEC Plus agreed to surge production for the second month. The group has decided to boost output by over 400,000 barrels per day in June. Sudarshan is standing by now on what this could mean potentially for oil marketing companies. Sud.
So crude sensitive saw a big move on both these sides. So why there was a big fall in crude? Crude over the last 2 to 3 sessions has fallen nearly 6 to 7%, and today intraday has fallen to lowest level, almost lowest levels the last time that we saw in 2021. So why there was a big fall? So over the weekend, OPEC Plus, which is led by Saudi Arabia and Russia, have decided to increase the production, and the increase is higher than expected. So increase for the month of June would be of 4.11 lakh barrels per day. Now, following that, crude has fallen. Now, what impact it would have on all these companies? So first, talking about upstream companies like ONGC and Oil India. If there is a fall of $1 in crude, it impacts annual revenue in the range of rupees 300 to 400 crore for these two companies. Now coming how this impacts positively to downstream companies, or say oil marketing companies like IOC, BPCL and HPCL. So the fall of $1 in crude, it impacts positively to EBITDA in the range of rupees 200 to 300 crore for these downstream companies. Now, last is why it's positive for paint company. So for paint companies, up to 50% of their input costs are linked to crude. So if there is a big fall in crude, it might have the positive impact, especially on the margin. So now the last question is, will there be a drop in retail fuel price after seeing a big fall that we have seen in crude? Last week, IOC in our interview had said that is very unlikely in near term.
As of now, consumers should not really expect some kind of a relief, so to speak. Am I right?
For the health of the companies, we have to hold on.
Well, that was last week. The chairman of Indian Oil Corporation saying that a fuel price cut was unlikely, but let's see how this plays itself out. Remember, it is, of course, a political call, finally. US President Donald Trump hinting that some trade agreements could be signed this week, however, has not provided any details. In an interview to Fox News, Trump also ruled out the possibility of lowering tariffs on China to negotiate a trade deal. But he did add that securing a fair trade deal remained a main priority for him. While addressing reporters at Air Force One, Trump further said that he has no plans of speaking to Chinese President Xi Jinping, but negotiations are ongoing with US officials. President Trump also said that the US is having discussions with several countries, but a trade deal will be solely set on his terms. This comes just a day after the president said he won't be seeking a third term as US president.
Well, I want a fair deal with China, but China's been ripping us off for many years, so maybe something should be thought about. A little bit of retribution. China's been ripping us off for many years, ever since they started. To me, I think it was the worst thing that Richard Nixon never did.
Is there enough?
And it was the worst thing. He's the one that got it started. Nobody understands. We're negotiating with many countries. But at the end of this, I'll set my own deals because I set the deal. They don't set the deal. I set the deal. At some point in the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I'm going to be setting the deal. I'm going to say that such and such a country has had a tremendous trade surplus their way with us. They've taken advantage of us in various ways. And we fully understand what they were doing. We were being led by people that were not very smart. They were able to be taken advantage of. But I can't be taken advantage of. So at a certain point, I'll be just setting a certain tariff number.
Well, that's President Trump. Back home, Mahindra reporting a strong set of numbers in the fourth quarter, beating street estimates across most fronts. Net profit up nearly 20%. Revenue grew over 24% in the quarter. Tractor margins hitting multi-quarter highs, while healthy volumes have boosted overall revenue. The company's management says they expect mid to high teen growth for the SUV and EV segments in the current fiscal year. Private banks have continued to post robust deposit growth of nearly 6% in Q4, outpacing PSU banks. The banks also reported strong margin expansion, even as SBI's margins contracted. Abhishek is standing by with more on how banks fared in Q4. Abhishek.
Well, to begin with, large lenders have reported their Q4 FY25 performance. And if you take a look, at the comparison table, private banks have seen robust deposit growth on a sequential basis, anywhere between 5.5% to about 7% range. In fact, at a time, this has come in, at a time when deposit growth is a big concern in the industry. Seasonal in nature in Q4 for deposit growth to happen for SDFC Bank and Axis Bank. Now, SBI has seen the weakest deposit growth on a sequential basis at just 2.9% in Q4 FY25 amongst large banks. If you take a loan growth, and if you take a look at the loan mix, the corporate portfolio has actually been shunted down by private banks because of the unfavorable yields. That is what many managements have commented. So, the likes of ICICI Bank and Axis Bank and Kotak Mahindra Bank as well, they spoke that, unfavorable yields have led to corporate book not growing that much. On the other hand, if you take a look, SBI's corporate growth of 5.5%, that is corporate loan growth, has been one of the highest amongst all the large banks. Now, net interest margin has improved quarter on quarter for most of the banks, especially ICICI Bank and SDFC Bank. They have seen the highest sequential growth in their net interest margin. However, for SBI, it's actually shrunk by 1 basis point on a sequential basis. Now, operating Operational efficiency was another area of focus. It's been the highest decline for SBI, their cost-to-income ratio declining by 184 basis points on a sequential basis. Axis Bank and Kotak Mahindra Bank actually saw an increase in their cost-to-income ratio. Meaningful part in any bank's result is the return ratios or ROA. So SBI saw a decline in its ROA, that is return on asset, on a sequential basis, while Axis Bank and ICICI Bank have seen the highest increase in their return on asset ratio on a sequential basis. If you take a look at the valuation picture with reference to price to book value, large banks like HDFC Bank, ICICI Bank on the private side trade between 2.7 to 2.9 times, while SBI is trading at 1.5 times price to book value on a one-year forward basis. Back to you.
Abhishek, many thanks. That's the bank report card for you. Now, nearly 2 weeks after the Pahalgam terror attack, India has curbed the flow of water to Pakistan through the Chenab River. Sources say that authorities have emptied the Baglihar Reservoir and shut the gates. India has already suspended the decades-old Indus Waters Treaty with Pakistan. The Prime Minister met J&K Chief Minister Omar Abdullah over the weekend to discuss the situation in the Union Territory post the attack that claimed 26 lives. Meanwhile, Pakistan continues to violate the ceasefire along the line of control in Jammu and Kashmir for the 11th day. The Indian Army said it responded promptly and proportionately. Russian President Vladimir Putin called Prime Minister Modi and strongly condemned the Pahalgam terror attack. He emphasized that the perpetrators of the heinous attack and their supporters must be brought to justice. The United Nations Security Council is holding closed-door consultations after Pakistan urged a meeting on the rising tensions with India. Earlier, Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif accused India of falsely attempting to link Islamabad to the Pahalgam attack and demanded a neutral probe into the incident. Parikshit standing by now with more. Parikshit, India has sent a water warning to Pakistan. Take us through what has been done.
Well, now India has started implementing its options as far as restricting or slowing down the flow of water to Pakistan is concerned. We suspended the Indus Water Treaty. That was the first step. Now we believe that the Indian government has halted the flow of water to Pakistan from Baglihar Dam on the Chenab River.
Right, Parikshit, unfortunately, there is a problem with the audio. We'll reconnect with you in just a second. We'll head into a break, but up next, President Trump orders a 100% tariff on foreign-made movies, saying Hollywood is dying very fast. The move is likely to impact Indian films that release in the US. A detailed report coming up. Nearly 2 weeks after the Pahalgam terror attack, India has curbed the flow of water to Pakistan through the Chenab River. Sources say that authorities have emptied the Baglihar Reservoir and shut the gates. India has already suspended the decades-old Indus Waters Treaty with Pakistan. Parikshit is standing by to explain to us what exactly has been done. Parikshit, a water warning being sent out to Pakistan. Take us through what this means exactly.
Well, these were options on the table when India suspended cooperation under the Indus Waters Treaty. India has now said that it will maximize the use of the Indus water system to its own advantage. It will construct dams wherever necessary. There will be some short-term measures and long-term measures. Among the short-term measures was restricting the water flow through the Baglihar Dam. Now, India has carried out a desilting process which is allowed under the Indus Water Treaty. We have flushed out the reservoir and we have put down the gates. Now, what this means is that the flow of water through the Chenab River into Pakistan's Punjab province will be reduced significantly. Now, there is a window till which this can happen. It remains to be seen what happens after that. But we're told that the Indian government is also considering doing the same at the Kishanganga Dam location. So these are measures that India is taking. We're still waiting for an official confirmation from the Indian government. There is another high-level meeting of the Indus Water Commissioners, the Jal Shakti Ministry, the Ministry of Home Affairs. In fact, all the actions around the Indus Water Treaty are being monitored very closely by Amit Shah and the Home Minister on a day-to-day basis.
Parikshit, many thanks for joining us. President Trump has said he will impose 100% tariffs on movies that are produced outside the US. Now, in a post on Truth Social, Trump said that the state of the American movie industry is in dire straits and dying a very fast death. Trump added that other nations offering incentives to draw American filmmakers and studios away from America. He went as far as to call the crisis a national security threat. Now, Shilpa joins us with more on what this could potentially mean. Shilpa, President Trump turning his lens on films now, how is this likely to impact the Indian film industry?
Well, Shireen, as things stand, details remain very unclear, right? Whether the levy would be on production costs or on revenues, whether it would extend to both theatrical releases or streaming content. But Trump's announcement of plans to impose this 100% tariff on foreign-made films has already had the global industry talking. More importantly, Indian film producers that we've been talking to say that they're yet to get full clarity on what this could mean for their business models going forward. But one thing is clear, that the United States is a major overseas market for the Indian cinema. Industry insiders estimate that 30 to 40% of the overseas box office collections for Indian films come from the United States, and it is much higher for films in the South. For Telugu cinema in particular, the US is second only to Telangana in box office collections. Big budget films often collect up to a quarter of their total revenue just from the US markets, and here releases typically are spread across 700 to 800 locations nationwide, and on day one most of them are sold out. And titles like, if you see Bahubali 2, Kalki, Pathan, RRR, all of these have seen massive success, grossing anywhere between like 15 to 22 million each. And in 2024 alone, Indian films grossed roughly about 160 to 170 million at the US box office, and all of this could stand impacted. But the concern here also goes beyond box office numbers. If the new policy extends to streaming platforms also, that a possibility that hasn't been ruled out yet, industry insiders are saying that it could discourage platforms from, acquiring or commissioning Indian content aimed at the US viewers as well. And that could be a setback for the growing international footprint of the Indian cinema. Now, if you look at the broader context, Hollywood itself, that's grappling with rising production costs at home. In 2024 alone, US production spending stood at $14.5 billion, which is actually 26% down from 2022, as studios increasingly chose international locations for production, like Canada, the UK and Australia, and all of these because they have been offering attractive tax incentives, and also local crew is more skilled. Now, the US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick had responded to Trump's post saying, "We're on it." So for now, studios and producers across the globe are waiting for further details on how and when the tariffs might be applied, and what categories of content it could fall under them, and what the potential impact could be. Back to you.
Yes, we're all waiting to hear more on the implications of this. Shilpa, many thanks for joining us. But here's the latest in the online gaming case, a matter that's being heard in the Supreme Court. The central government has told the court that it's not concerned if real money online gaming is classified as a game of skill or chance. The government argued that such a distinction is immaterial and the taxes will be paid equally on both. Ashmit standing by with the details. Ashmit, the government making it clear, skill or chance, it doesn't matter, 28% GST it is.
Indeed, no shifting there, no change of course. 28% levy is here to stay. That's the government's position. And this is important given as how the government is laying down the gauntlet. Bear in mind, this is the first detailed hearing that's taking place in the GST issue regarding online gaming companies. First time that we are seeing this before the highest court of the country. And here, the government's rationale is that, look, we understand, the government says we understand that there are games of chance, there are games of skill. The distinction, however, that the government is trying to draw is that irrespective of the games of chance or skill, when there's a money component involved, when there's staking, when there's wagering involved, that necessarily, irrespective of game of chance or skill, then translate into a case of gambling. So here, the government's rationale is that irrespective of the nature of the game involved, it is inconsequential when it comes to the computation of the GST demand. And this is where, in fact, we also have the Council for the Government draw the attention towards state-specific legislation, citing the example of Nagaland, saying that Nagaland is one state that makes a distinction, games of chance and skill, but even Nagaland, which protects games of skill, goes on to charge them, treat them as gambling when there's a case of money wagering. What is also important is that this is the first time that we've seen a direct position being taken by the government against fantasy gaming. Here, in fact, giving the analogy of the famous football player Messi, the Gaming Council, the Council for the Government, went on to argue that there are bets, there's wagering done on how many goals Messi might score in a match, saying that there is absolutely no control any of the players have any control over how many goals Messi will score. And citing that as an example, said that even in case of fantasy gaming, even there, any money wagering will be classified as a case of gambling and therefore subject to the 28% GST levy. So clearly, just the day one of arguments, the arguments we understand will continue tomorrow as well. Another key question that the industry, however, will be watching for is whether or not this August 2023 amendment, which gave the clarification of the 28% levy, will it apply retrospectively? That's another question that many will be looking to answers for.
And that is an important question. Ashmit, appreciate you joining us. Air India's flight to Tel Aviv diverted to Abu Dhabi following the missile attack at the airport. The airline cancelled its flights till the 6th of May, and the suspension could now be expanded for a longer period. This disruption comes amidst an already tense airspace situation. For Indian carriers, as India and Pakistan continue to restrict each other's airspace, foreign airlines are also now growing cautious, increasingly avoiding Pakistan airspace. Let's go across to Madiha. She's standing by to take us through which airlines are now opting for longer alternative routes. So it's not just the Indian carriers, Madiha, even foreign airlines trying to avoid Pak airspace.
Absolutely, Shireen. The impact of Pakistan's airspace closure isn't just limited to Indian airlines. Several foreign airlines are also choosing to avoid flying over Pakistan, even though the restrictions officially apply only to Indian carriers. So as we have been reporting, the international flights from North India are the most hit, as they now have to travel to Mumbai and Ahmedabad and then proceed to their journey. We learned from airport officials that Mumbai ATC is handling nearly 135 more flights every day, which are both Indian as well as foreign airlines ever since Pakistan closed its airspace. Now, many flights operated by foreign airlines like Lufthansa's Delhi-Frankfurt flight, British Airways' Delhi-London flight and Air France's Delhi-Paris flight have chosen the longer route avoiding Pakistan airspace. There are others like Etihad's Delhi-Abu Dhabi and Oman Air's Lucknow-Muscat flight that sometimes avoid the Pak airspace, meaning there are days when they fly over Pakistan and then there are days when they don't fly over Pakistan. Instead, they fly over Mumbai and Ahmedabad. Now, interestingly, not all foreign carriers are avoiding Pakistan. American Airlines, United Airlines, KLM are mostly using the Pak airspace to enter India. Now, the question here is, why are some foreign airlines taking longer routes, even when they are not allowed, even when they are allowed to use Pakistan's airspace? So, as expected, when we asked these airlines, they said that this is a precautionary measure, keeping in mind passenger safety. There are two main concerns behind this rerouting. First, since tensions continue between India and Pakistan, any sudden retaliation from either side could leave these foreign airlines stranded in the sky if they don't have enough fuel to divert to another airport. And the second, in case they are forced to do an emergency landing at a Pakistani airport, then that could jeopardize the safety and security of Indian passport holders on board and lead to a risky diplomatic problem. So to prevent these unwanted consequences, some foreign airlines that we mentioned have voluntarily decided to take a longer route for Indian flights, although it will have an impact on their cost of operations.
All right, Madiha, appreciate you joining us. And with that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. The news will continue right here on CNBC-TV18. Stay tuned. We're back in a moment.